Tuesday, let's go live to Perth. Peter Dutton is speaking, campaigning in the new seat of Bullwinkle.
Another 3 years of this Albanese government in minority form will be a disaster for the WA economy. And I notice that Mr Albanese, even in his latest visit, still hasn't provided the secret detail to West Australians in relation to the nature positive, mining negative bill. And I think it's obvious to all people in this great state that when you've got a Prime Minister who's not being open and honest about the environmental plan that they've got to bring in, which will crush the mining sector here in WA and agriculture as well, the Prime Minister needs to be asked these questions. Why won't he release the detail? Why won't he give the detail up? Because he knows that it's going to be a wet blanket over the WA economy, and that would be a disaster not just for the WA economy but for the national economy as well. I'm happy to take any questions.
Here and elsewhere in Perth, have you sensed a shift in sentiment? Is the sentiment different here in WA than in the east?
Look, there's a long way to go between now and the election, but the sentiment has changed and there is momentum for change. People want change when the incumbent government, who they've given the benefit of the doubt to, just don't deliver. And not only has this government not delivered, it's made life harder for people. So people who have superannuation now find out that there's going to be a taxing of unrealised capital gains. That unsettles people in the investment decisions that they're making. The government has an 11-year low in construction approvals, and therefore that's why, in part, they've created this housing crisis. And so when you move around Perth and here in Bullwinkle and across the state, you can detect a change in attitude, a change in mood, and I hope that that momentum continues up to election night, because, as I've said, I think on election night we'll be looking to the West to see the results, and if we can change some of these seats over and Matt Moran can become the member for Bullwinkle, then I think we can win the election, but there's a long way to go between now and then.
600 signed up party members in Kirby's locally. What are you doing to reach the non-believers, and what do you make of the gender analysis of polls that suggests you still have a problem with female voters?
Well, I don't think that is the analysis, actually. I think when you look at the polling, there is a significant shift underway. The Prime Minister's net approval is down by something like 30 points over the last 18 months. And in part, that just reflects that the government's had the wrong priorities. The government spent $450 million on the Voice campaign, which divided our country. They have made bad decisions in relation to energy policy. You can't have a renewables-only policy. And I think the reason that a lot of women are unhappy with the Prime Minister at the moment is that largely they're responsible for household budgets, for trying to make everything add up. People have a really difficult situation in their own lives at the moment. And it's not just your household budget that's tight, it's also the local farmer and the local IGA owner who's paying more and more for electricity and cold storage, and all of that's being passed on in the form of higher grocery prices. And I think that's why the Prime Minister's run out of puff. We're not even at the end of this term, and for the last couple of months the Prime Minister's been talking about what the second term of an Albanese government would look like, when nobody can tell you what they've achieved over the first term. So there's a lot of work to do. We win the election, there's an enormous mess to clean up, but that was the case for the Fraser government after Whitlam, it was the case of the Howard government after Hawke and Keating, and it was the case for the Abbott government after Rudd and Gillard as well. Labor always wrecks the economy because they tax and spend, they can't manage money, they can't manage the economy, and that's why the coalition government will always be stronger in economic management, and that's of benefit to families and small businesses.
You mentioned the Reserve Bank earlier. Is it time for them to consider cutting rates? And what sectors of the economy do you think they need to pay particular attention to?
Well, I want to see interest rates come down as quickly as possible, but the Reserve Bank Governor has sent out multiple messages to the government that when the government's spending continues to increase, when you see the debt ramping up under Labor, that puts upward pressure on inflation and therefore interest rates stay higher for longer. Ultimately, the Reserve Bank Governor has the responsibility to look at all of the economic settings, to see where inflation is, to see where unemployment is, to see where the other key indicators are, so that a properly informed decision can be made about whether interest rates come down. But once inflation becomes entrenched, it's very difficult to get rid of it. And we've seen periods in our history before where Labor governments have made bad decisions and inflation ultimately gets away from them, and we see a very significant hit to the economy. Now, it's been bad enough for Australians over the last 2.5 years with their economic mismanagement. Another 3 years of Labor, and don't forget that Labor can't win in a majority form after the election. We're only talking about a minority Labor government. In concert with the Greens, they will wreck the economy. We're already seeing that by a bad Prime Minister and Treasurer at the moment, and it would be devastating. And the problems that they presided over then become so much more entrenched after 6 years. And that's why I think our country needs a change, and that's why I think we can get our country back on track.